Chargers wide receiver Joshua Palmer waited patiently while he stood in the shadows of Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, but now they are gone, and we believe he is going to break out in 2024.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers together now for 9 seasons, but this is our 7th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen, and to make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Well, Daniel, as surprising as it may sound, Joshua Palmer is now the longest tenured wide receiver in the wide receiver room. And I feel like now is his time to break out. He's waited patiently. He's had to wait behind Keenan Allen, Mike Williams. Now it's his time to shine. On defense, I could not be more excited to watch Daiyan Henley go out there and stuff the stat sheet like I fully expect him to do. And what are going to be the expectations from the 2024 rookie class?
That's a big question. I think there's some instant contributors there and some starters there and some guys that, might take a little bit, but definitely should play a role on this team in 2024. But today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. David, we are excited to get into our breakout candidate show because there are a few guys I think we feel really convicted about being able to take the next step, make a leap, however you want to phrase it. But I think these guys are all going to have big seasons potentially in 2024. And I think offensively it starts with Joshua Palmer. And I think it's for many reasons, including what you talked about before, right? He's the longest tenured wide receiver for the Chargers right now. He's also the only wide receiver that Justin Herbert really has a strong chemistry or rapport with, right? He's the only guy that's really gotten an extensive amount of targets from Justin Herbert. And I mean, it's a pretty big gap between him and everyone else on the roster. I mean, Joshua Palmer has had 195 targets from Justin Herbert in his 3-year career, taking away the Easton Stick games of last year. The rest of the Chargers roster combined has 81. It's Stone Smart, Simi Fehoko, Darius Davis, and Quentin Johnston. That's it. So he definitely has a leg up in that regard. And to me, David, I know this isn't the bold prediction show. If Joshua Palmer can stay healthy and if he plays 17 games, I think he will be the Chargers' 1,000-yard receiver in 2024.
Just really love Joshua Palmer's game, Dan. I feel like he's a very well-rounded wide receiver. I feel like he has strong hands. He already has that trust and that chemistry with Justin Herbert. He runs good routes. And he can do a little bit of everything. If you need him to go up and get the football, he can go up and get it. If you need him to get some extra yards after catch, he can provide that too. And he's also, had some explosive plays in his past. But I go back to the one season where Keenan Allen missed most of the year and Joshua Palmer was that main target. He caught 72 passes that year. So we know that Joshua Palmer has that ability to step up and step into that number one wide receiver role. He has had to bide his time because obviously Keenan Allen was getting the lion's share of those targets. Mike Williams was making the spectacular catches, but now it's his time. Now it's Joshua Palmer's time to step up into that role and go prove to the Chargers that himself at 24 years old is ready to go be the wide receiver 1 for this football team.
Yeah, and I mean, it's crazy. It feels like he's been around forever, right? But it is, when you hear 24 years old, I think it puts into perspective. He's still very young and still has room to grow. I think that, even then, right, when Keenan Allen was injured and he put up the 72-catch season, like, he still wasn't wide receiver 1, right? That was Mike Williams. Like, he was still in the shadow of someone else. 1,000, both those guys went for over 1,000 in 2021, the guys he was going up against. But I think you have seen it in short spurts that he can provide as a number 1 wide receiver. And now you just need it on a more consistent basis. I mean, if you even look at just the Easton Stick games, the last 3 games that he played in last year, right? He still played pretty well, even though it was Easton Stick. I mean, 15 catches for 204 yards in those 3 games. I think you would take that, especially knowing kind of what Easton Stick brought to the table and that challenges the offensive faced when he was out there. I think the other thing is too, is if you look, not including the Bears game in which he got hurt last year, he had a 5-game stretch there where he averaged 90 yards per game. Like, that's
That's
wide
real
receiver
production.
one stuff right there. That's,
Yeah.
16, 1,400 yard season type of stuff right there. So he has shown it in spurts. He does have the chemistry and the trust with Justin Herbert. I don't think there's any reason outside of health that he could, that he shouldn't break out. I mean, he has dealt with more, even though he's only missed one game in each of the first 2 seasons combined. He did miss 7 last year. Did, kind of fight through some stuff in those other years too. But if he's healthy, man, I mean, he should be wide receiver 1 for this team without an asterisk. But there's another guy here, David, who I'm not willing to fully put into my breakout candidate list, but I'm starting to sip the Kool Aid a little bit, and it's scaring me a little bit. And it is about Quentin Johnston, because we've done this before, right? We got hyped about him last year, kind of tempered expectations a little bit because he dropped a bunch of passes at the end of training camp. But David, it did feel like something had clicked for Quentin Johnston late in training camp where he was having some really dominant practices, right? Yeah. He's also not a starter for this team. I know what the unofficial depth chart says, right? Him or DJ Chark. And I think, with DJ Chark out, we'll see who kind of fills that role. Do they move Josh Palmer to X? Do they put in Quentin Johnston? Is he the next guy? But I think you have to wonder, okay, well, if he is wide receiver 4 when DJ Chark comes back, how big of an impact can he make? Can he truly have a breakout type of a season? So I'm not fully willing to say that yet, but I'm finding myself again intrigued by the prospects that Quentin Johnston, can be an impact player for this offense.
For me, Daniel, there's 2 reasons why I am kind of bullish on what he can do in his sophomore season. The first is that he's improved his route running. He's been able to create separation, which is 2 things that he struggled with last year. Is running routes, creating separation, and getting open. And obviously the second one is going up and high pointing the football, catching it with his hands. He dropped three passes last year. At least that's what he's credited for. It seemed like it was a little bit more than that.
Right.
But I feel like if Quentin Johnston is put in positions to succeed, for me, which is in that Z wide receiver role where you can kind of get him a running start and let him go attack the soft spots in the defense and let him go do what he does best, which is create with the ball in his hands after the catch. Quentin Johnston is extremely difficult to take down. He is a large wide receiver, 6'3", 220 pounds. Quentin Johnston's got a lot of physical gifts. I understand after an underwhelming rookie season why it's a little bit difficult to buy into Quentin Johnston going into this season. But for me, I've seen some actual tangible growth. And that's why I feel like if that continues on that trajectory, we can get a Quentin Johnston that is a dangerous weapon in this offense.
I think the most exciting thing is just the fact that it seems like he's become a more well-rounded weapon as opposed to just being kind of a gadget weapon and a guy that can do more things than just take jet sweeps, right? Or throw screen passes to. It feels like he can be more than that now, which I think is exciting. And we'll see if he gets the opportunity to do it, because during training camp, he didn't win a starting spot, right? As impressive as he was, especially towards the end, he didn't win a starting spot. So we'll see what the opportunities look like. We'll see how it, serious DJ Chark's injury is, and how long he can miss, but we'll see what happens. But I'm excited about it, and I'm intrigued by it for sure. Last one I want to get to really quick is a guy that's not as sexy of a name, but a guy that I think truly could make a leap in 2024 and have kind of a breakout and maybe live up to some of the expectations we had for him. And it's Daiyan Johnson now with the new regime coming in, who cares a lot more about offensive line than maybe some in the past.
Yeah, Daiyan Johnson's turned into an absolute monster. He looks the part for sure. He actually has gotten better from year 1 to year 2. Gave up 5 sacks his rookie year, 4 sacks last year. Also 40 pressures his rookie year, 33 pressures his second year. So hopefully that continues in a much better way. And I feel like with him being able to go forward and use that physical nature, I feel like we could see a very improved year from Daiyan Johnson.
Yeah, Greg Roman, I think, has become somewhat synonymous with good offensive lines. And I think a lot of people got a boost when this new regime took over, while other people kind of got left in the dust because they didn't really fit it, right? He's a guy that I think really benefits maybe the most out of anyone. A guy that has a ton of potential, has all the talent to do it, but really he's just lacked that consistency, right? Like, that's really all it is with Daiyan Johnson. He can be dominant for 55 out of 60 snaps in a game, but some of those snaps are disasters, and that's unfortunately what it's been. I like the fact that you can tell he put in the work in the offseason. I like the fact that he went to O-line masterminds with Rashawn Slater, I believe, for the first time this offseason to put in the work there. And I think he absolutely could start living up to that first-round pedigree that, and show why the Chargers took him there. But Defensively, it starts with one guy, and it's Daiyan Henley, who finally will get his chance. And I think him, combined with the coaching of Na'Vorro Bowman, is going to turn into something really special. And don't look now, but Kristian Fulton could be in for a very big season as well. So we're going to talk about that and much more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, so I know you guys have heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little bit different for you today, because now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel it at any time. And since it's starting the football season this weekend, the real football season, I'm not going to pretend, after I failed miserably on Florida State the last time I tried to do a college one, we're going to stick with the Chargers. And I'm so convicted that they are going to be able to put a beat down on the Raiders that I like them by more than a touchdown. If you want to take an alternate spread, you can just take them at the 3-point favorites that they currently are on FanDuel, but I'm taking as much action on that as I can. I also told you I love Gus Edwards at plus 240 to be an anytime touchdown scorer. I'm very surprised that McConkey has lower odds there. He's plus 210. I think Gus Edwards is that goal line back. I think he'll have a great shot at getting into the end zone in week 1, but you can bet on who's going to score the first touchdown, the last touchdown, the first half-point spread, all of the things that you want to bet on you can get at FanDuel. So visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. All right, David, well, let's talk about the defensive guys we're excited to see break out in 2024. And I think this is a guy that I know you've been chomping at the bit to talk about a little bit, and it's hard for you to contain your excitement for what we're going to see from Daiyan Henley in year 2. Because last year, for whatever reason, maybe because Brandon Staley forgot his birthday, we didn't really see him, right? And it's not as if the linebacker play was impeccable from the Chargers last year. It wasn't. But there seemed to be a vendetta maybe between the two of them. And Daiyan Henley, even while showing a ton of potential and in the very limited snaps that he has, being really good, he never made it on the field. So now he's still kind of an unknown commodity going into year 2, but we can start getting excited again about what we saw in limited snaps last year, what we watched on tape when he was at Washington State and UNLV. And it just feels like so far during the offseason, maybe it was kind of a ramp up for him. It feels like he peaked right at the end and started having really big practices, looked really good in the preseason. And I absolutely believe that Daiyan Henley is going to be one of the breakout stars of this defense in 2024.
I absolutely cannot wait to watch Daiyan Henley play. Daiyan Henley is a physical freak. This guy is athletic as hell at linebacker, a former safety, a guy that can run sideline to sideline, has excellent feel in coverage, and can go out there and cover for real. Like, he has real coverage chops, and that's pretty rare from a linebacker. I also like the way that he sheds blocks. He doesn't seem to be able to get blocked or stay blocked for very long. He's able to go shoot and make tackles. And yes, in limited snaps, 54 snaps, he racked up 10 tackles, 4 stops. And then in 2024 in the preseason, 45 snaps, 8 tackles, 1 pass breakup. That's the Daiyan Henley I expect. I feel like this is a guy that is going to stuff the stat sheet. He's going to get sacks. He's going to get interceptions. He's going to rack up a ton of tackles. If he stays on the football field, there are really not many limitations to where Daiyan Henley's game can go.
Yeah, he's the, Derwin James version of a linebacker, truly. In his last 2 seasons at Washington State, or his last 2 seasons in college, I should say, over 200 tackles, over 5 interceptions, over 5 sacks. Like, that is filling up the stat sheet for sure. And there's no reason that Daiyan Henley shouldn't have 100+ tackles, right, this upcoming season. I would say that I would sign up for that right now, because we know he's starting. Yeah, right? That's the big thing. Like, Junior Colson, hard to say, what that final stat line is going to look like, just because he's going into the season, fighting an uphill battle because of the time that he missed. But as far as Daiyan Henley goes, so impressive. Like you said, the coverage instincts, all that's great. Just the fact that I think he really has a chance to be an impact player in all 3 phases, right? Like, he's a plus blitzer, has the potential to be. He's a very, very outstanding tackler, but also just a good run defender as far as finding the hole, having the instincts, not only being able to take on blocks, and it's great that he has the physicality and the nature to be willing to do that, right, and go meet a 315-pound guard in the hole, but he also has the athleticism to beat, guards and tackles to the spot. Like, he can get around blocks as well. He's all about defeating the blocks, and he has different ways to do it. He can take you on head on, or he can beat you to a spot and put himself in a position for a tackle for loss. But the big thing here that I'm so excited about is him matching up with Na'Vorro Bowman, because Na'Vorro Bowman has been an absolute lightning rod in this coaching staff and has really brought one of the positions we were most concerned about or had the most questions about leading into the offseason into a group that I think we feel really, really good about. Because, I mean, the starting linebackers last year were Eric Kendricks and Kenneth Murray, right? Those were the two main guys. Those guys are both gone. I feel way, way better about this linebacker unit than I did last year, and I would probably no matter what, but I think these guys, right, Denzel Perryman, Daiyan Henley, Troy Dye looked really good.
Yeah.
What we might see from Junior Colson, like, this has a chance to be the best linebacker unit in a very, very long time. It reminds me, like, when Jatavis Brown had the one season, Denzel Perryman had a really good season, and we're like, oh, these two the next, 4 years are going to be insane, and it all fell apart. But I think with this unit, like, it feels deep. It seems crazy to say that. It feels deep. It feels like this team knew it was an issue, right? And now even a guy like Junior Colson, who played in this defense, is going to have to fight to get some snaps in this defense this year. But let's talk about another guy who I think is very, very primed and ready to have a great season, David. And I think it's Kristian Fulton. And I think not only is he primed to be a breakout candidate, I mean, I think he leads this team with 6 interceptions this year.
Ooh.
I just feel like there's going to be a lot of interceptions. I love the pass rush for this team. Obviously, I think there's going to be a lot of rush throws. And I don't think there's anyone that has shown more consistently throughout the offseason that they're willing to capitalize on it than Kristian Fulton. Obviously, I could be getting carried away because, he feasted the week that Easton Stick and Max Duggan were taking a lot of the snaps. I think he had like 5 interceptions in 1 week at training camp, maybe like 3 practices at training camp.
For the confidence. That's
for sure. But like, I just think that, we've seen him be pretty good. 2021, his best season.
Yeah.
I think he has a chance to be really good, like a true kind of CB1 for this team if everything goes right.
Yeah, when Kristian Fulton is healthy and he's on the field, he can produce stats like his 2021 season where he had 2 interceptions and 11 pass breakups and a reception percentage allowed of 48.4%.
That'll
which
do.
Is disgusting.
Sub 50 will do.
Yes, that is unbelievable. And I think the injuries has been what has bogged him down, has not allowed him to continue or reach that full potential on a year in and year out basis. Kristian Fulton is still 26 years old, still very, very young. I feel like a change of scenery, getting him in a new scheme, getting him with new coaches, hopefully getting the injury situations under control with Ben Herbert, getting that strength and conditioning up, which is one of the things that Jim Harbaugh talked about when bringing Kristian Fulton in, was wanting to get him with Ben Herbert. So hopefully that budgeting relationship turns into positive results, because if what he has done in the offseason translates to the regular season, he could turn a 1-year deal into a multi-year deal and make some big, big money.
And then the flip side, David, right? If he plays as poorly as he did last season, who knows if he's on a squad next year? Like that is kind of what's at stake for him. Like,
gotta bet on yourself.
He could, catch on somewhere as a depth piece or whatever. But like, this is a really, really big season for him because he hasn't really played well since that 2021 year. But going, to what you were alluding to, like the coaching staff and the guys who talked about this signing basically said, we didn't think it was a, Kristian Fulton doesn't understand the defense or his technique isn't right. They felt like it was an injury problem. Even though he didn't miss a ton of games, they felt like those games that he was out really hampered him more for the rest of the season and not just the games that he missed overall. So I think you would take that absolutely. I mean, 2021, 10 out of the 13 games that he played in, he allowed 34 yards or less, only allowed 2 touchdowns for that entire season playing on the outside. And I just think that the flexibility that potentially gives Jesse Minter, if you can give him a CB1, right? If you can do that for him, I think it changes a lot, and I think just raises the ceiling of where this defense can get to. Like, I think we're bullish on a defensive turnaround. I think we've been snake bitten, and then Brandon Staley had the #1 defense in the league before he took over with the Chargers, and he did it at the NFL level. And it never was good. It never even pretended to be good outside of a handful of games where it'd be like everything clicked into place and they looked like they were world beaters.
Twice, maybe.
Exactly. I mean, never against good teams. I mean, that's for sure, right? But with a hugely retooled roster as well, David, I just think the Chargers really need someone that's going to be able to take the football away. Like, this is a defense that I think, for those who want this to be a top 10 defense, they're not a top 10 defense unless they're like a top 10 takeaway defense. Like, there are some question marks.
They're synonymous.
This is a work in progress defense with some really standout players, but a lot of question marks as well. So, like, I think that ceiling for this defense, if Kristian Fulton can be that guy, then you have a CB1. You have 2 true number 1 edge rushers on the outside. You have a potential best safety in the league. And when you combine those 4 things at the 4 most valuable positions on defense, now you got something to work with. Now you can start to believe, hey, this might be like a legitimately good defense. And Justin Herbert's never had one of those. Very, very exciting to think about. But the other thing he's maybe never had is a great right tackle. And we're hoping that Joe Alt can be that in 2024. So we're going to talk about the expectations we have for the rookies, guys who are going to start and contribute right away, guys who might contribute down the road but still will have a role, and then some guys who it might be a little bit of a redshirt season for, and they might have to sit in season a little while before they get on the field for meaningful snaps. So we're going to talk about all that and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, I need to tell you guys about eBay Motors, because passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number 1 ride or die, you will always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts that you need at the prices that you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins this season. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. All right, David, well, we talked about some of the breakout candidates, but I did want to, before we get into the season, because there's only 2 more shows left of the Locked On Chargers podcast before we're talking about, the game and recapping a game live on Sunday night after
Amen.
David goes to the game, the first game of the Jim Harbaugh era. I'm not jealous at all. And I think it's important to kind of know what to expect from these rookies. And since we're talking about 8 players who made the roster, 8 of the 9 guys they drafted, we broke it down into categories of what we kind of expect and what should be expected of these guys in year 1. But before we get into that, I do want to make sure everyone is making their second listen after you make us your first listen, the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast, because if you don't want to be embarrassed at the end of your season and have your friends be able to talk trash to you for an entire offseason, and we know in football off seasons, it feels like it's like 9 months, go follow and listen to the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast. You can find them on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast from. And so you can avoid that terrible punishment at the end of your season. I can guarantee you, you won't have that if you listen to the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast. But let's get to the first one here, David. The first group and the first way we categorize this was starters and instant impact players. And this is a list of 2 guys right now. It's Joe Alt and it's Ladd McConkey. Those guys are starting. The Chargers will be leaning on those guys, and the Chargers need those guys to produce early on and for the entire season if they want to do what they need to do this season.
Yeah, Joe Alt switching over to the right side, looking really, really good in the preseason. 30 pass blocking snaps, only allowing 1 single pressure. So hopefully that transition translates to the regular season. And Ladd McConkey seems to be an NFL-ready route runner, has a really strong ability to separate, and I feel like he's going to be sneaky in the yards after catch department as well, and I expect him to be a main 3rd down target for Justin Herbert this year.
Absolutely. I mean, I think Ladd McConkey could challenge Josh Palmer for the lead, at least in receptions and, in 2024. I don't know if he'll lead in receiving yards, but I think receptions, targets, especially with how I think we've seen Justin Herbert try to look for him on critical downs at practice during the offseason training camp. I think he's going to be that kind of player. And like you said, he's ready to go. If he can stay healthy, I very much expect him to have a great season. Joe Alt, the important thing with him is going to be patience a little bit, right? Because we're going to talk about this in the crossover show. We're going to talk about it on our Keys for Success show on Friday. Like, he gets Max Crosby week 1. That's about as big of a test as you could possibly get. Luckily, he's been going up against Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack, who are probably, very, very close.
Pretty good practice.
Very good practice. Max Crosby's a different kind of player. He's a plus player against the run and against the pass. And I think that, it's going to be hard not to panic a little bit, I think. But man, like, you can't judge success just based on that. We're obviously going to judge that as a whole season. I think when things are all said and done, we're talking about him as maybe the best rookie tackle this year. And I don't think that's really even a hot take. And I think that's exactly what the Chargers need him to be. And like I said,
that's what they drafted him to be.
He's trusted to protect Justin Herbert. And if they're putting him out there day 1, they're fully trusting him to get that done. But Let's get to the next section here, David, because these guys for me are guys who will be key depth for this team and will kind of have a role no matter what. And to me, that's Junior Colson, Kamani Vidal, and Brendan Rice, even though he's a 7th round pick. All of these guys, I don't think they're not starting right away, but I do think they're going to get playing time. I do think they're going to have an impact on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, Junior Colson, it looks like he's just ready-made for the NFL and for this particular defense. Obviously, excelling at that defense, in that defense at Michigan. And he has his defensive coordinator and pretty much all of the coaching staff over there to support him to make sure that transition is as smooth as possible. Kamani Vidal, we saw him in very limited carries, but we saw exactly what we needed to see. And I do think he is going to get some carries to help spell Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins, keep them fresh throughout the game, and not feel like you're going to get too much of a drop-off. And Brendan Rice made plays with Justin Herbert and was able to make big plays down the football field in practice. Didn't see it too much in the preseason, but I expect them to be able to connect on a few passes this year.
Yeah, and I think the thing about Brandon Rice is even though he's probably wide receiver 6 right now out of the 7 that they have, probably only ahead of Darius Davis after the Simi Fehoko preseason and training camp that we saw, he's one of the only X receivers they have on this roster, right? So, even though he might be wide receiver 6, he might be wide receiver 2 at the X position, wide receiver 3 at the X position. So, I think that especially, if you're looking for a goal line threat or a red zone threat, something like that, he'd be good. He's obviously showed that he excels as a run blocker as well, did very well in that regard. It was really fun to watch him, and we know this coaching staff values that. Kamani Vidal, because of the injury history of J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, he almost certainly will, have a good amount of carries this year, in my opinion. I don't think we're going to see both those other guys for all 17 games, right? Knock on wood. I hope we do. Yeah. But Kamani Vidal will have a role no matter what. The interesting thing with him early will be, hey, when the Chargers are going into these games, are they going to have Kamani Vidal as the third running back that's active? Or is it going to be Hassan Haskins, who we know is a special teams ace, right? Yeah, if you're not really expecting, to not use Gus Edwards, like Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins, those are 2 good running backs, and they're going to get a lion's share of the, of the carries. It'll be interesting to see. That's something we'll learn week 1, right? Who do they keep active? Do they keep all 4 of those guys active? I don't know if Kamani Vidal is an impact special teams player if he's not a return guy. I would love to see him as a kick returner. Conversation for a different day, but it'll be interesting to see. But I do think he will have a role. And then as far as Junior Colson goes, really just got slowed down by an injury, an appendectomy, but showed even in the one preseason game that he played in that he clicked in, he fit right away, and he looked great. So I could see him, especially probably already being a better coverage linebacker than Denzel Perryman, getting in at some point, maybe getting in some sub packages, right? Getting the athletic duo of him and Daiyan Henley out there in certain situations will be very hard to tell me isn't the best combination of guys that could be out there, especially in obvious passing downs, right? One of the things that killed me last year is the Chargers defense in 3rd and crazy long, keeping Eric Kendricks on the field.
Yeah.
Even keeping Kenneth Murray on the field wasn't great either in those situations. But to have those 2 there on 1st and 10, but also 3rd and 12 just never made sense to me. It killed me. So if they wanted to, skip the dime backer and kind of put Junior Colson out there in that kind of a role, knowing his athleticism, that wouldn't surprise me at all. These last guys, David, it might be somewhat of a redshirt season. We'll see. The one that's very intriguing is Tarheeb Still, because these are guys who might not play much as rookies. It's Tarheeb Still, Justin Eboigbe, and Cam Hart. Cam Hart got beaten out by Dean Leonard on the outside for that next guy on the field taking over for a Kristian Fulton or Asante Samuel Jr. if that happened. And also just got hurt, so probably didn't get to put his best foot forward. Still bullish on his future and what he can turn into, right? Justin Eboigbe might be part of a rotation, but he might be also the last guy in that room right now that's getting snaps. I don't know if he outplayed any of the guys ahead of him for the entire offseason and training camp. They also signed Tierre Tart, which is, not really the same position for those 2 players specifically, but just another guy that's getting snaps and is more ready, I think, than Justin Eboigbe is at this point. And then it comes down to Tarheeb Still, David, who could be the backup slot right now to Ja'Sir Taylor. So his best way onto the field is either Ja'Sir Taylor gets hurt, which he's, I think, missed 1 game over his first 2 seasons, or just a lack of play there, right? And then you also kind of throw Elijah Molden into the mix too, where it's hard to say, convincingly that we're going to see a lot of Tarheeb Still in year 1.
Yeah, which is a little sad for me because I really did enjoy watching his tape. I feel like he's a corner that's a strong tackler and that has some real ball skills. So I was hoping to be able to get him out there. But hey, if Jasir Taylor won the battle and proved that he was the best slot corner to be on this team on the field week 1, then we have to give him the benefit of the doubt and let him show that he was the right choice for that. But I do feel like a lot of these guys, the corners in particular, I think they're going to have a pretty, tough path to get on the football field. I think Cam Hart is the guy that needs the most seasoning out of these 3 players.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, my biggest critique of Cam Hart when they drafted him, right, and in our review of him was like, he is prototype size, big, fast, everything. Didn't always play that way. Like,
Yeah,
he didn't always lay the lumber. And unfortunately, in that last preseason game, we saw that, right? 2 really bad missed tackles, didn't really play up to his size, and obviously missed some time, which making the leap from the NFL or to the NFL at these positions is so incredibly tough. Like, even the smallest amount of missed time can really hamper you. The unfortunate thing for these guys, too, is like, what most people don't understand is once the season starts, it's way more about game planning than it is about developing, right? There's not as much time for these guys to get their hands held during the regular season because they're going to be focusing, and the guys who are going to be getting the reps are going to be the guys that are playing on Sunday. You have chances on the scout team to go make plays, right, and show your ability there. But as far as the one-on-one kind of development goes, that stuff usually takes a little bit of a backseat during the season. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how these guys can grow and what they look like when we do get to see them. But that's kind of where my expectations are for these rookies. So hey, okay, just because Cam Hart's not out there doesn't mean he's not going to be good. These are the guys that it's probably going to take a little bit. But that's going to wrap things up for today's show. The good news is, what tomorrow is? The first crossover episode of the season. Locked On Chargers, Locked On Raiders, revenge game. The game that brought Jim Harbaugh to the Chargers 63-21, which is a blowout, but also a great thing in Chargers history. Can't wait to see what your boy Q has to say about this matchup. But to make sure you guys don't miss it, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from, as well as finding the show every day on all of our social media. You can find us on Twitter at Locked On LAC, on Instagram at Locked On Chargers, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. You can also find the show every day on our Twitter accounts. You can find me at Dan Talk Sports and David at Dro Talk SD. But we're so excited. There's actual football only days away, and we thank you guys so much for making us your first listen and going on this ride, because buckle up. I can't wait. Jim Harbaugh year 1, Jim Harbaugh, Justin Herbert collab that we always knew that we needed starts on Sunday. So thank you guys so much. We'll be back with you guys tomorrow with Crossover Thursday. But until then, take it easy and go Bolts.